Hello, I'm doing something slightly different today, so bear with me. I'm going to do some video analysis. I think this is the first time actually that I've done any video analysis, certainly in a video like this anyway. Of course, I've done analysis on desks and stuff like that and whilst casting, but this is slightly different. I want to go back over a replay of one of the games that happened, because as I was watching it live, I thought this was a really interesting thing. I tweeted a little bit about it and people had a bit of a back and forth discussion, a very small one. So it's less... To be honest, it's less of an analysis, more just me pointing out some cool things that a team did and like looking at their thought process behind it and asking a conceptual or theoretical question towards the end of the video. But for the beginning, this is, as it says, there we go, mirrored camera, and I still managed it. It's the Misfits versus Movistar Riders game from the Contenders Qualifier in the first day of the European Contenders Qualifiers. So it was these two teams facing each other on in the semi-finals. So both teams had already secured their place and they were just playing for seeding. But I always find it interesting when these two teams match up, especially after they match up at TakeOver as well, because Misfits has beaten these guys over 3 series now, including the one that I'm going to go over, or go over a very small part of. And Misfits have always done worse in the competitions other than this final one in the Contenders Qualifier because it was single elim. Whenever there's any kind of double elim or groups or anything like that, Movistar Riders always comes out against other teams better than they do against Misfits. So I think there's some kind of mind games going on there, or some sense that these two teams' styles match up in favor of Misfits. Misfits more of a 2-2-2 team, love running the Diva a little bit more. Movistar Riders very much triple DPS. They rarely switch off, but they like to run Zarya a little bit, and this is the crux of what I'm going to be talking about, is an interesting moment on Route 66 where Finzi was running the Zarya and kind of the mind games that went behind that. So if we go over to this one, hey, look at this, fancy. So this is the Contenders thing. I'm only going to be using a short amount of this footage, but so basically it started on Route 66. Both of these teams, first time they're matching up in this particular qualifier, and the sound is off, so you don't have to listen to the casters or anything, but I'm just pointing your eye towards the compositions that they're running here. So Movistar Riders, as soon as Neptuno switches off, although Neptuno got a ridiculous scatter arrow kill that is just unbelievable at the beginning, but Movistar Riders are running a triple DPS setup on their attack. They're starting off with that, and Misfits are defaulting towards this Genji Tracer with the Diva, and then having Zebasai on the defensive Ana as well, though that's less important than the Diva situation, which is really what I want to pull your eyes towards. Because Manitan, I think, or whoever they happen to have the Diva, it's been different for this team, but throughout the Contenders Qualifiers, Misfits really seem to want to put Manitan on that flex role so that he was the only guy doing the Diva, so he can really specialize in it, I think, is like my theory of what they're going for. Feek was almost always on the Tracer, Nevix was almost always on the Genji, occasionally swapped over to the Soldier if they wanted the double hitscan Diva Winston. So that's how this fight started. The round then goes on with Movistar Riders using their triple DPS really well, got a great initial pick, which was equal parts lucky and perhaps no, it was literally just luck, mate. It's a scatter arrow, like that was so lucky. And they're able to get this first pick, and they're just rolling it forwards, and they get the momentum, and they complete the round with 25 seconds left on the board or something like this. If I scroll along to where the next round begins, so actually Misfits attack. Hopefully I've got it right. Yeah, okay, so this is Misfits attack. So Misfits again are opting for the Diva on Manitan. This time they've got a Zen, you know, not that consequential. Most teams, if they're going to run an Ana, it's going to be on defense, and they're going to go over to the Zen on attack. And then they've got Tweak and Nevix on the double hit scan. But again, Movistar Riders here running the triple DPS. And this triple DPS defense on Route 66 kind of gets rolled over. They don't have enough peel to be able to deal with it. Manitan gets up in their face, and they're able to crack through multiple, I'm not just talking about this fight, but multiple ways through. And they essentially do pretty much the same. They managed to complete Route 66 with both teams having under a minute on the clock, and they go into overtime. And so let me skip forward to where the overtime situation is. It's somewhere around here. So if we have a look at this situation in the overtime, you see, if I pause it, you can read at the top there that Misfits have 1 minute and 9 seconds on the clock, and Movistar Riders have 1 minute. So there was only 9 seconds different between these two teams. You know, once it's scaled up so that the minimum team has 1 minute, Misfits only completed it with 9 extra seconds. So what does that 9 seconds even mean? Like, if you're in an overtime and you're playing a map that doesn't have any capture points, particularly, so there's no opportunity for you to complete it with over 1 minute and deny the other team a chance of pushing. If both teams complete it, even if they're both in overtime or whatever, or one's in overtime and the other has 3 minutes, on Route 66, on Gibraltar, any of these payload maps, both teams are going to have a chance, and the difference between the two is how much time they have before it goes into overtime. But that actually, the way that it works out in the game is a very minor advantage for you to have. Even if you have an extra minute on the clock, a lot of teams, especially in this meta where the offense is favored over the defense in a lot of situations, having extra time doesn't make that much difference because both teams are going to go into overtime and still be able to push anyway. And it kind of comes down to how quickly can you clear them from the card, or can you get your defense in a situation where you start rolling a couple of fights together and generate ultimates? And certainly 9 seconds is literally no difference whatsoever. So you have to approach this with a different philosophy, I think. And on Route 66, a lot of teams approach this overtime situation philosophy with, if we hold with like a triple DPS or a 2-2-2 dive composition really aggressively on the defense and lock them near the spawn, then they're going to waste probably the entirety of that minute, or at least 30-40 seconds, just trying to break out of that first initial area. If I can highlight it for you, it's like round this corner, you know? So like round this corner in the spawn area over here, they'll hold really aggressively, and that'll whittle a lot of time off, and then they just need to win one fight somewhere around here, and they've got it, and they've locked you out. Misfits and Movistar Riders both decide not to do this, and both in general, I think, have got a read of each other that they both dislike doing that in general. And the reason for a lot of teams is that if you lose a fight really early on, because they have such a an attacker's spawn advantage because they're so close to your spawn because you're defending really close up, you can't even get into their backline because they're holding inside the spawn. It's super difficult to actually win a fight up there. You're just delaying time. And if you kind of open the door at that point, then maybe you're going to give them somewhere where they can just kind of roll momentum forwards all the way through. So instead, Movistar Riders, something I loved from them in this situation because they're attacking first. When I saw it, I thought that is brilliant. They have put Finzi over on the Zarya. So instead of running the triple DPS, which they've essentially been running for the entirety of the map, they know that Misfits are going to be running this Diva from Maniton on the defense, and they also were running it on the attack as well, so it's super predictable coming out from Misfits, and super good as well. It's a very versatile composition, but Movistar Riders have gone with the Zarya here deliberately into the Diva. That's good for a number of reasons. First of all, if you lose the initial fights and it's looking desperate, he can always switch over to a Soldier 76. You know, if you're nowhere near the Graviton as well, but you just need to win a couple of fights around here and Misfits have got the better end of it, you can still switch. Your spawn is only over there. You've got tons of time to be able to do that. So it's worth it in the sense that if it doesn't pay off, you can still fall back to your plan B fairly easily. It works because it, in terms of the hero matchup, works really well. You can get a lot of work done into the Diva. They can't peel for people as well. The defense matrix obviously doesn't work whether you're playing into the Diva or whether you're getting damage into the rest of the team as well. Finzi can try and bubble the rest of his team so that they can break through. So in general, this Zarya composition plays fairly well into the Diva composition. But you've also got to consider the Graviton as well, because if they start to win this initial fight, if Misfits are expecting to play into a triple DPS, which they should be from Movistar Riders, and Finzi wins the fight by putting a lot of pressure on the rest, or they can just put a lot of pressure with the bubbles or the damage or anything onto the rest of the team and they end up winning that first fight, Finzi's going to generate his ultimate and they're going to start rolling, and once they get a Graviton going, they can then win the next fight and they can stop using the rest of their ultimates. So you start a snowball running as well, which is super important with only a minute on the clock. If you get into a snowball situation, it's disastrous for Misfits. So let's just see roughly how this plays out. They win the first fight. I'll just set it playing. I won't run the whole thing. But they win the first fight, and Finzi does a lot of work. They essentially neutralize Maniton's ability to impact, to play aggressively, to peel. It's a good composition to work into it. And then they start rolling, and they have a bit of a Graviton. If I can tick it forwards, they start rolling it massively. With less than a minute left, you can see that Finzi in overtime here has generated 64% of his ult. They're still winning the fight in general. The rest of his team does a great job as well of making good use of their ultimates, and they're winning the fight. But the crucial thing here as well is not only have they managed just to get it here, but Finzi's getting up to his ultimates, and that Graviton's going to be massive in the next stage as well. So not only have they developed a little bit of a snowball, like you would if you were playing triple DPS, where the snowball isn't ultimates, the snowball is momentum and forcing staggered spawns and putting a lot of pressure on your opponent. They've got double whammy there because they're putting a lot of pressure on because they're still playing a really aggressive dive composition and they're right in Misfits' face. But they've now got this Graviton. Also, what it does is it forces Maniton to switch over to the triple DPS, where Misfits have generally looked slightly weaker. They're a team that enjoys playing with the Diva, or in general playing 2-2-2. And if you put a Zarya in your composition, the counter to that is for Misfits to run triple DPS, and you're kind of asking them to run a composition that they look slightly less comfortable with. Their triple DPS in general doesn't look as well honed as other teams. So this was really nice just from the conception of it, coming out from Finzi and Movistar Riders. I really enjoyed this. It was a nice little strategic element to add into the end. Now, if I can skip forward, what you'll see is that they essentially get... Finzi gets a large amount of... Finzi gets a huge amount of value out of that first grav, and then I've skipped forwards pretty much. You can see they're in the warehouse here, and they get a huge amount of distance. They eventually get stalled, but look how far ahead they are. They are doing phenomenally. And then it finally gets ended there. So this is where they get. That's unbelievable for 1 minute that they're able to take it all the way to here. They only had a minute on the clock. And by the fact that they're running triple DPS, or no, sorry, they're running dive-centric compositions, which for starters, like a tiny error is going to send you reeling backwards. It's not like tank where you slowly get chipped down and then you're able to put up another position but just further back and you slowly get chipped down again. It's like you're trying to find a position to counter dive into them, but with individual players getting picked off, at no point do you actually feel comfortable doing that. So in general, dive v dive can be much more roly, I feel, even though there's no ultimates involved in that sense. The snowball is not ultimates. Those are the differences, I feel, between the snowballs that develop in kind of control-centric compositions where you have a lot of tanks. You have big CC ultimates. But anyway, let's get into some... So, what do Misfits do to reply to this? They have got to... they've got to do something or play super well to be able to match this, right? And actually, Misfits don't go for anything crazy. It's actually, I want to focus on what Movistar Riders do again. Because as much as I loved the Zarya when it was on the attack, when you're in overtime situation and you know that you're going to be playing into a Diva on Route 66, what I really thought was super risky, and this is kind of the crux of what I wanted to discuss in this video, is running the Zarya again on the defense. Let's see, I'll just let it play here. And you'll see what happens to their defensive composition. So, just to remind you, they've pushed it super far. They have a lot of room to work with. If they win essentially any fight after 1 minute, they're going to win the map. So, okay, let's skip this replay as well. Where does it go to? It goes to 29:30, something around here. Okay. So, a lot of people, kind of conventional wisdom in Overwatch has said for a while, if you have a situation where you only need to get one fight win, maybe you're attacking King's Row and you just need to get a single tick, or before, like back before that was the thing, you only had to capture the point. And people would recommend, a lot of analysts and stuff, when they're doing VOD reviews or whatever, would recommend, like, why are you not just going for one big combo? Just one big ult combo, you know you're going to get the win off the back of it, you're going to be able to cap. And for the longest time, I've actually disagreed with this. But this is why I said at the beginning of the video that this is not me trying to analyze and teach in any sense, because I think this is still a very open topic. It's like open to discussion, I think. There are a few different philosophies that you might have approaching these kind of situations. Depends kind of what meta it is as well. But here's how you lay those situations out. For a lot of the teams that are playing really well at the moment, this is my argument against running big ult combos. For a lot of the top teams at the moment, if you've got a situation like the one that Movistar Riders are playing here, where you only need to win one fight after the minute runs out, then if you just run your default, at some point throughout regulation time, you were able to win at least one fight. It would be incredibly unlucky for you to not win one fight if you're just going head to head with Misfits in this sense. You were able to do it last time. You got them down to 30 seconds or 25 seconds, something like that, over the course of the entire 10 minutes they had to push the map. So you were definitely winning fights. And if you cripple your composition in a sense by going for picks which only reward you in terms of the ultimates that you then come out with, then you're more likely to get rolled backwards and have to rely on the ultimate as your one last chance. You're essentially putting all your eggs in one ult combo basket. And it might be a fucking great basket. It might be a basket made of titanium, you know? Nobody's getting through this basket. It looks like an absolutely solid basket. But if you drop the fucker, the eggs are still going to smash. Like, if you shit the bed with your ult combo, that is your one chance of winning the game, you know? That you've run like a Zarya Hanzo combo just for that one combo. Just for the ultimates. If you shit the bed with that combo, or it's counted in some sense, you've been running a subpar composition the whole time that hasn't allowed you to win any of the actual head-to-head fights without the ultimates being in the situation. So, if you drop this fucking great basket, the eggs are still going to smash, no matter what. And if instead you just went for the head-to-head and just ran your normal game, you've done so well on your attack that you probably don't need to do anything inventive on the defense. So if you look at the idea of how it worked in this game, the Movistar Riders here decide to go with the Zarya again. They decide to go with Finzi on the Zarya. The idea here isn't that it plays well into Misfits, who are going to be able to go back and change to a triple DPS combo, and then they have the advantage. The reason that you don't see Zarya in the meta very much at the moment is because it's weak into triple DPS. It's a diveable tank. It doesn't have that much mobility. The bubbles as a resource are not as good as running something like the defense matrix, because they're not able to be pushed out as much. It's difficult to generate charge against triple DPS in that sense as well. So Finzi and Movistar Riders here are playing at a disadvantage in terms of the direct head-to-head composition that they've chosen to run with. And instead, they've put their eggs in the ult combo basket. At some point, and the casters mentioned this as well, Jason Kaplan and Jameson recognize this. They recognize the thought process going behind Movistar Riders, and they say, you know, if you get one graviton off here, one good graviton, and you're able to follow up with it, you're going to win. If you manage to get one graviton anywhere between right when the game starts and halfway through the warehouse, you're probably going to win. The issue is you're playing into triple DPS where you're getting pressured back all the time, and look at how much pressure Misfits are applying here. It's crazy. Because Finzi can't get as much value out as if he was playing the Soldier, or if he was playing the Diva even. Or even if they were playing... even if they were playing tanks so they went for loads of ultimates, they would probably not be crumbling as quickly as they do this. They would be able to set up at some point and maybe generate their ultimates, but that's an aside. That's a completely different topic. In terms of how this triple DPS plays into the Zarya, they're playing at a weakness here, Movistar Riders, and you're banking on the ult combo. Now, if I pause here, you see that the danger as well is that if Mineral and Zebasai set up their support ultimates and save one of them, you know, it's normally going to be the Transcendence, for when Finzi has his Graviton, that's a decent counter. The only way that they can then play around that is if they also save Logix's Pulse Bomb. So they need to find one fight. They only need one fight. This is the great part. They only need one fight at any point. That's just, you can't even argue with that. That's a great advantage. But that one fight has to have a Graviton. It has to catch people. It has to be paired up with a Pulse Bomb. And it has to not go wrong. And so Movistar Riders have to force out support ults from Misfits, set themselves up in a good position to catch people in the Graviton, hit Logix's Pulse Bomb into it, get the kills off it, and then be able to win a fight. And the issue is that that wouldn't be so bad, except they're only going to get one opportunity to do that, the whole fight. And so, if you watch how it actually works, it does actually work out in the end for Movistar Riders. They do actually get it in the end, but it was way closer, and it was, I mean, if I was playing on Movistar Riders here, my butthole would be tense. Because you've got to imagine that if you had the triple DPS in one of these situations, you would actually have a really good chance of winning a number of these fights. They've given up They certainly gave up one at the start. They've given up another fight here where they could have taken an equal ultimates fight and actually had a chance at winning when it's in overtime. They give up another one later on, and I believe they also give another one. So I think it's between 4 and 5 fights that they give up that could have been even exchanges where they would have had an opportunity to win. Although, you know, if you lose one of those, it starts to back up against you. So maybe only like 3 or 4. But they give up a number of good opportunities to be able to just knock Misfits off the cards, because they're trying to force out support ult. So here they force the support ult out of Mineral, and then they're going to try and apply pressure to Zebasai and force it out of him without dying, and Finzi's up to 90%. So they get the support ult out of Zebasai as well. The thing is, they lose a lot of players here, and then you've also got a situation where there's a fight happening around this area where Logix doesn't have his pulse bomb, and this scrappy fight develops where Zebasai and Mineral actually get close to building up another support ult. So this is where Movistar Riders this is where they have to strike, right? And this is my issue with this concept in general. And I just want to reiterate as well, this isn't me like lecturing from on high. I just have a different opinion, I think, to a lot of other people and players. Because when I tweeted this out as well, Chipsa, who used to play for Hammers, back when they were called the Chavs, messaged me, and he was like trying to explain to me like why it's a good thing. I know why, or at least I believe I know why. Movistar Riders were running it in this instance, and they feel like it was a really good strategy. But I think I just have a different opinion on it, and I don't actually believe that either is correct until we really see how it plays out in the long term and see how people adapt their strategies and stuff. But here's where it's perhaps most evident that this fight could have gone really badly for Movistar Riders, because they've given up all of this free room, the entirety of the map almost, right to the second checkpoint. Right to the second checkpoint, the beginning of the warehouse on Route 66, without playing a subpar composition into Misfits when it's been so even all the way through, just to build up this Graviton. Finzi finally has it, only just now, because it's taken him a while to build up the energy and build up the damage, because he's playing into triple DPS. They did manage to force out the support ults. Let's think for a moment how badly it would have gone if they hadn't forced out the support ults and are now in this situation in overtime where there's, what, how many meters are there left? Like 50 meters or something before they're drawing or winning. Well, winning. You can't really draw in this sense. If either of these support ultimates are still active, Movistar Riders have made a bad gamble in that sense. To me, it epitomizes like high risk, high reward, this kind of play. And most people refer to it as the safe option. That's the other weird thing. Like, in my head, it's very high risk, high reward, because you have one opportunity to pull it off, and if you do it, you're safe. But people think about it as the safe option because it should win you the fight if you manage to execute it. But it's all, to me, it's like the sample size is so small because you only get one opportunity to actually pull it off. That's essentially my problem with it. So if you see here, so they have to get the, yeah, there's the other thing as well, actually. Jason Kaplan, that was fortuitous as well, because he's just reminding me of something. If Misfits recognize what they're going for and flex Maniton, or even maybe Nevix at this situation off to the Diva and eat the Graviton, they're also fucked. There are counters to the Graviton as well. They could go back to spawn now that they've got the forward spawn and just switch like one of their players onto the Diva and attempt to eat Finzi's Grav, and then they're still in a fairly bad situation where even though they've got a lot of ultimates, the entire point of their defense has disappeared. The whole reason they're running Finzi has disappeared. So, I didn't mean to turn on the volume there, but Jason Kaplan provided some great analysis, as always. So, this situation, they absolutely have to execute it. Now, they do in the end. There's a spoiler for you as well. So, Movistar Riders do end up pulling this one off, which is, again, another reason why I'm not trying to say that this was a terrible idea. I just think it was quite risky. And they also have the Nanoblade to put into the back as well. But Maniton shuts it down with his Tactical Visor. And that is 2 ultimates that have immediately just disappeared. But they managed to get the Grav off. Logix has the follow-up, even though he didn't have the bomb. So if anybody else is close to a support ultimate, they've already used the bomb in the previous fight. They used it to try and get rid of those guys. And Logix manages to get the follow-up there and actually charge his bomb up in the end. But this is not far away. This was really pretty close. And they had one fight that they had to execute on, which I think is really interesting as like a philosophy going into that defense. You've already done so well on the offense. but you're deciding to put all your eggs in one basket. Like, we have to win this fight as soon as our graviton's up. Otherwise, we're kind of screwed. Which I think is a super interesting like thought process for a team to have, to deliberately go into that situation and believe that that's the safer option. And I know a lot of people advocate for this as well and think that it is the best thing to do. But to me, it's... yeah, like I say, I have a different philosophy about it, I think. I think that if Movistar Riders there had instead run the triple DPS, or even a 2-2-2 setup, though they don't often do that. But if they'd won the triple DPS, they would have had at least 3 to 4 fights where they would have been at even odds or would have had better odds of being able to beat Misfits. But that whole concept is weighing up. Do you want to have 4 fights where you're on even footing or you're just going toe-to-toe with the enemy team? Or do you want 1 fight where the odds are stacked in your favor, but if you don't pull it off, it's pretty disastrous? So I always find it really interesting when teams opt for one or the other in this situation. Rogue are a team where they opt heavily in kind of what I've been advocating for, where they will just go triple DPS in any situation, or not any situation. They've actually started flexing slightly differently. But prior to their most recent games, will go triple DPS in any situation because their chances of winning a triple DPS engagement from their team are actually pretty high. Like, say it's like 70% or 80% when they're actually playing against teams in the West. Their chance of just winning a fight with them performing head-to-head when they're not at a disadvantage is actually really high. So why would you want to go for some ult combo if that then puts you at a disadvantage in your regular fights? So you can definitely see different philosophies towards this this concept in Overwatch throughout different teams and different regions when you watch. America tends to, I don't really want to generalize, but historically or classically, America and American teams, including Envious, I think as well, have opted fairly strongly for ult combos and been very good at being able to pull them off and use them at the correct times and going for stuff like playing the Zarya for the graviton in a lot of situations. I feel like there are a number of Korean and more recently European teams who will just play compositions that don't have any kind of synergistic ultimates or potential to have big team wipes or stuff like that because they're going for individual fight wins over the course of a map and using that to maximize effectiveness. So there you go. I just thought that was super interesting to see the use of the D.Va, sorry, not the D.Va, the Zarya in that game. And wasn't really analysis, just a bit of a discussion. So there you go.